Welcome to the Riffhard podcast. I'm EYAL Levy. With me is guest co-host Spiro Ducias, and our guest today is Stephen Taranto, who is an Australian guitar player, I would say phenom. You can find him on Instagram and just have your mind blown, or you can check out his band, the Helix Nebula. This dude is nuts, man. This dude is nuts at guitar.
He is one of my, he's on my Mount Rushmore of guitar heroes, and to me was like, he was the first guy in this next generation of like psychopaths on the instrument that like stood out and has just, he's special, like no doubt.
His level of ability, it's like baffling. I don't really get it, but I want to just clarify. When I say someone's baffling, if what they're saying musically is kind of garbage, I don't consider them to be great. So when I say someone is like technically baffling, I'm also saying that what they play sounds cool too. So that's what's baffling to me, is like when someone is that good technically and also what they're playing sounds cool.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, like the combination of those two is just like, wow, that's crazy.
The thing about him is like, and the thing about like all the great, like shredders or whatever, is like, you can tell that the way he plays is his like authentic expression on the guitar. That level of like, just turbo is like, that's him speaking on the guitar. And like, when you see it that way, it's just like, fuck, it's amazing.
Yeah, you know what's so funny, man? When people say shredders have no feel.
Oh, they feel it, dude. like you don't know what it's like to be in their skin.
Yeah, you're just operating at a slower RPM, buddy. You're driving a Yugo there. Yeah, they are a Ferrari. That's basically what it is.
For sure, man.
But the ones I've known that are, I guess, that top of the mountain type players, that is who they are. And that like expression, that's their personality. The speed at which they play is the speed at which they think.
Yeah.
It's an intense group of people to be around.
Yeah, dude, Steven in particular, I'm stoked for this one, and he's got a brain that a lot of people should pick if they get the chance.
Well, let's give it a shot. Here goes. Stephen Taranto, welcome to the Riffhard podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. What an honor to be here.
Yeah, I feel like this is an interesting situation because between you and Spiro, I feel like, I don't know, a bomb could be created. With the level of kinetic energy that you guys have on guitar between the two of you, it's interesting for me because I consider the two of you virtuosos. I'm not one of those, but I've spoken to many of those. So I'm wondering, and starting with you, Stephen, do you consider yourself a virtuoso? And if yes, was that always the goal? And if no, what's wrong with you?
It's funny. It's one of those things where I felt like I started learning very young and I got really good really quickly. So maybe at one point in my mind, when I was maybe 2 or 3 years in my guitar journey, I was like, wow, I'm really good. I got so good so quickly. I'm the best. But then the better I've gotten, or the longer I played, the less accomplished I actually feel. It's like that reality sets in of like, look, I'm good. I'm okay. But there's just like, these guys like Spiro and a million other guys out there. It just makes me sort of reevaluate everything. So short answer is, I guess, no. But the long answer is, at one point, maybe I did. But these days, I don't really have that mindset anymore. It's more just like, I just kind of just do it because it's an inherent thing I do now. But that journey to keep getting better is still there, luckily. It's the same as everyone. It's like when you see comments of like, I quit guitar. It's like, I feel like that as well when I see these guys like this.
I was expecting that. In my opinion, all the best players I know feel that way. They feel like either they suck or they're just kind of good. And they're just aware of what they're not good at. And
absolutely,
that they need to keep pushing at that. And I know that it's cliche to say that, once you're comfortable, that's when you start to suck. But for real, I've encountered this mostly when I was producing bands. It doesn't really happen in the context of my career now because of who I work with. But when I was recording bands, there'd always be those people who would come in and act like they were just like God's gift to music or something. They were always the worst.
I bet they sounded like it too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If God's an asshole. Like, God's gift if he hates you,
right?
I guess. What about you, Spiro? How do you self-evaluate?
I don't think I'd ever use the term to describe myself, but I think, as the theme of the past couple of minutes, like, well, for one, Steven, you're one of my guitar heroes, man. Like you're on a very short list of influences to me. Let me know if you relate to this. Wow. The better I get to, the better I realize it's like, I sometimes feel like I'm a bit of a specialist at a few things or at like one thing. And it's almost like the better you get at that one thing, the more you can isolate yourself on this island of like, that's like my thing. And that's like how I make my stamp. And that's how I express myself and all that. There's an identity that comes with that. But then I think the kind of like, oh shit, realization moment is when you see some of these other guys that specialize in your weakness or that have like, that fucking Guthrie Govan, Max Ostro level, like...
Just can do everything.
Yeah, and that in and of itself becomes like its own specialty.
Yes.
And I think it's a healthy thing to probably never be satisfied if the goal is to always just adopt as many skills and kind of have them in your toolbox at any given time. But I do think it's cool when you look at it of all the players and how they all have, like if it were a video game, they all have their like super fucking power or whatever. Like it's
they're a shooter fan or like they're an RPG wizard or something.
Yeah, it's also like I like to like romanticize that aspect of it too. Long story short, the question of wanting to lean into your strengths or get better all around, it's an interesting one because it's almost like sometimes the identity comes from solely like shamelessly leaning into your strengths. And I feel like you can't get as good as you are without probably doing that as if it's like second nature or something like that.
Every legend out there, right? Every musical legend is known for their strengths and strengths that are like beyond the norm.
Strength beyond strength.
It's true.
But you don't know them for the shit they suck at.
Right.
That's the thing.
Because they don't show it.
They don't show it. I guarantee you there's something that they suck at.
Yeah. I suck at a lot, dude.
Same. I suck at the things I'm apparently good at. I feel like I can definitely relate.
That's good.
What's something that like you've never ever learned on guitar that you, Steven, I'm wondering?
Oh
like,
man, where do I start?
That you'll see when you're scrolling Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and you come across guitar players that are like just insane. I can tell you, for me, it's like when I see people doing all the like the slap stuff or the thump stuff or like any of that multi-hand kind of shit. Yep. That's just like a foreign language to me. So is there anything like that for you?
Literally, I was just thinking those two exact things. So like maybe 4-finger tapping or thumping or any kind of slapping, like the sort of Tim Henson style chordal slapping thing, which just sounds so freaking good. But it's like, it's one of those things where like what Spiro was saying, that's just so far, what I feel so far out of my reach of like what I'm willing to put the practice into these days, where it's like, maybe I'll just dive deeper into the hole I've already dug into. So I've sort of done that, but it's like, I can appreciate that and they have their own thing, but I feel like, and it may just be a very self-deprecating way of looking at it, but, which is very normal for me. But I feel like even if I was to learn that and spend the time to learn that style, I don't feel like in my head I would add anything else to it. I would just be replicating what already exists. Not saying I don't, like that I have some super original sound as it is now, but I feel like I've kind of carved the niche. Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. One day I'll hear it, but
no, but you do though, and that I think that's an important like that's really important because I feel the same often where it's like I see someone do something and I'm like fuck, like same thing as well, like that whole kind of thing. And it's like whenever you consider adding some technique that you associate with some person or scene or niche or something like that, it's like, yeah, I could probably do this, but like, would it feel like me or sound like me if I did?
Exactly.
That's also part of it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just feel like if I'm not really adding, I mean, it would be cool to learn it just for the intrinsic value of learning a new skill and I guess a new tool in your arsenal, which may create, or like elicit some creativity out of it. But in my mind, if I was just learning a lot of the thumb stuff, you generally get it at your basics, your animals as leaders, your Victor Wood and patterns and stuff. And it's like, I'm just going to sound like them at this point, because I'm just like, maybe I'll get to a point, maybe I'll come up with something, but I don't know. I think at this point, it's like I can spend that same amount of time perfecting what I do even more. I don't know. It's probably a very black and white way of looking at it, but I guess just this from expelling effort sort of way. I've never learnt it. Yeah.
I appreciate that a lot. I try to tell people this on Riffhard and a URM all the time, which is you have a finite amount of time on the planet.
Yep.
There's no way that you can possibly do everything. You just can't. You have to decide what it is you want to do, especially with something skill-based, skill, technique, talent, and knowledge-based like guitar. There's so many different ways you could go about it where you could spend the rest of your life and still not complete the mission, to where if you try to do everything on guitar, you're probably not going to get that great and you're probably going to be disappointed a lot. And there's like a few freaks out there who can pretty much do everything, but that's totally not the norm.
No, not at all.
The thing that will keep you on the instrument the most is the thing that you should do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And you should expel the things that are going to, I guess, get in the way of you making the most progress possible, or that will get in the way of you coming to the instrument. Like, for instance, I know some people feel really, really bad about not learning theory. Like, they feel like they're fucking up or something like that. But every time they sit down to learn theory, they get super bored and frustrated and then they quit.
Yeah.
And they just don't do it. And so then they start to associate theory with school. And so then they never want to learn it on guitar in any way, shape, or form. And in some cases, I've seen people who just stop playing quite as much because they develop this complex about that, when in reality, it'd be a lot easier if they just accepted, okay, I don't want to learn theory, whatever.
Yeah.
The end. Just go learn something else. Learn the thing that'll keep you coming back.
Yeah. It shouldn't kill the joy of the thing that you were learning and were getting good at and potentially enjoying quite a lot. Yeah, it shouldn't put that much of a damper on, I guess, the holistic experience of it. Yeah, I'm definitely an advocate for that kind of thinking as well. And I've fallen in those traps as well, particularly with like, production and all that. So I was like, I'll never be a mixing engineer. What's the point of writing it? So, like I've fallen in those traps when I was younger. Now it's a bit like whatever, like you just do it. and if you don't know how to do it properly, there's hundreds of people out there that can. So
That's a perfect one, actually, the mixing or production, because modern musicians pretty much all record themselves to some degree. Yeah. So because that's reality for so many musicians, obviously they have the ability to get better at it. They have a DAW staring at them every single time they sit down to do music. So if they have any drive to get better at things, they're going to keep on opening that DAW, and it's going to be talking to them and telling them they suck and that they should get better at it. And then they're going to hear their mixes, and they're compared to who they listen to. And
it's a bit unfair, isn't it? It's a bit unfair.
They'll start to feel like they should just quit.
Yeah.
It's important to realize that it's okay to not be like the Will Putney. It's okay to be good enough to just record your own stuff.
Question: Where do you guys think on that whole scale? A little bit of like the Dunning-Kruger thing of like where do you think the delusion sits in of thinking you're better than you are as a way to maybe expedite the time it would take by staying excited throughout the whole process? Like, it's a slippery slope, right? If you're starting something or you're getting better at something, and you're not great at it yet, but you can see far enough into the future to see ways to iron out the kinks that are there, even if they haven't been ironed out at all. You have no idea how you're going to do it, but you can see some reality where there's the light at the end of this tunnel and you can do that thing. It's almost like sometimes believing that future outcome already exists gives you the confidence to just make it happen eventually. I feel like I've experienced that with certain skills, and then you look back and you're like, Jesus Christ, I should not have been that confident 3 years ago. That sucked. But you're like, I can do it now, so did it matter? It's a weird one, because if you're too harsh on yourself, you quit. If you're too delusional, you suck and you never get better.
Yeah.
There's this optimal percentage. Yeah.
That's a very good question. When you lay it out like that, I thought, there's no way that's me, because I'm always just hating on myself. But there probably was a time in sort of that sort of journey where, maybe there were certain techniques or things that I couldn't do and thought I could never do. And then you kind of just, I guess, wake up and you can do it. I mean, it seems like that because obviously there's a lot of data missing, just memory lapses and, getting older and all those things. Some things just get expunged from your memory. But yeah, I think it is healthy to have some kind of goal that's seemingly unattainable at first. Because otherwise, like you said, you just kind of stagnate and then you just don't really get anywhere. You've accomplished everything, and what else is there left to do? So I guess kind of a Dunning-Kruger of like, not so much in the sense that I know more than what I already know. It's kind of a weird thing when you're sort of, putting it out in the universe, if you believe in that sort of thing, that you're going to get better.
I mean, a little bit, man. Yeah, it's weird. Like, I'll be honest, dude. Like, when I used to see your videos in like that, like 2017, 18, when it was just like earlier Instagram days of like, before Permanence came out, I was like, whoa, fuck. And I remember, like, at that time, I was a bit like conflicted as to like, do I put more of my focus into guitar? Do I put more of my focus into audio and the engineering and production side of things? And I remember kind of feeling like, and this is a sentiment I've been wanting to kind of throw out there too. It's felt in the kind of like DIY recording age of like rock metal guitar that like it's kind of expected that everyone's like a jack of all trades and that like it's best to be well-rounded and have a wider set of skills and all this stuff. And it kind of felt somewhere along the lines, the idea of like, at least for me in my circle that I was in or whatever, it kind of felt like the idea of giving everything I have to the guitar was like less realistic. And I remember like distinctly seeing some video that you put up when you had like 3,000 followers or whatever, being like, I have to do this. Like, I was like, this is as high as I'd value anything. And like, I remember like feeling a bit of that, like a light bulb went off for me around that time where I was like, I gotta like mine as much potential out of my body on this instrument as possible. And there was a lot of that where I look back now at some of that shit and like, man, it's just a weird one. It's like I can do certain things now that I sure as fuck could not have done then. And I had the confidence then, even though I was like imagining I was in the future. It's like a weird...
Interesting.
Yeah, but I guess here's the difference though. And it's real brutal. But the delusion is some people can and some people can't. And they both have to be somewhat delusional at the beginning because everybody sucks at the beginning.
Right.
I mean, it's not delusional, though, if you're able to eventually do it. You can't know in advance. That's the problem. So everybody's kind of got to jump off that cliff, and some people's parachutes will work and some won't.
Right, yeah.
But everyone's got to jump off believing that it's going to work. And it's just it's a sad reality, actually.
Yeah.
The thing for me that makes it Dunning-Kruger and delusion versus someone that's just confident and like got good direction is the person with Dunning-Kruger and delusion does not adjust based on feedback that reality is giving them. They have already decided that the outcome exists, and they are not taking in any outside information to tell them that reality is not what they want it to be. So, for instance, with Nail the Mix, we have the mix poll every month, and lots of people don't make it in. There's hundreds or thousands of entries every month. There's a top 20 poll. Obviously, odds are not going to get picked. And there's always this contingent of people that are super pissed. It's not like a huge contingent, but every single month there's this contingent of people that are super pissed. And without fail, every single time that I've checked out the mixes of those people, they are fucking terrible. And they're convinced that their mixes are better than anyone that got picked. What always happens, though, is we help them get better, and then a year later or 2 years later, they'll hit me up and apologize for being dicks. And they're like, wow, I couldn't even hear how bad I was. And that's the difference between someone who has Dunning-Kruger versus someone that's and delusional versus someone that's not. The person who thinks that they're better than they are and then decides that maybe I'm not, I'm going to have to keep on getting better.
Right.
Like they get presented with reality and you're like, oh shit, I got to keep going. That's the difference, I think.
Yeah, I think it's almost like you have to have like two parts of your brain, almost one that knows you're nowhere near the goal and one that pretends that you are. So it's like the one that knows that you're full of shit has to be the responsible parent that's like driving the ship. But you need the like drunken bravado to just do the thing. Like it's almost like one is like the energy that allows you to do the thing and the other is the like the oversight. You know, that's like
actually really good business relationships operate like that too. And I know that a lot of bands are like this, but I can tell you between myself and Finn McKenty, who's one of my business partners here. He's our director of operations. He's pretty risk averse and very much like a spreadsheet operations kind of guy. And I'm like a risk taker, visionary type, like fucking charge that machine gun trench kind of person. And he's not. But the two of us keep each other in check.
For sure.
Because he might not want to do things that will, grow the company or that will be massive because of the risk involved or whatever. Risk averse, doesn't want to fuck things up. I am not good with keeping things in check, and I will definitely go for that thing. And I think that some level of that in your own head is definitely important too.
For sure.
But if you're not like that, it's good to be around people who are, basically. So if you are the more delusional, charge to the trench kind of person, and you don't have that part of your brain that checks you, then you kind of need to find someone in your life to do it for you or something, I think.
It's good advice.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm very, very much like Finn in that sense. Very risk adverse, very safe.
You're risk adverse?
Very safe. Definitely too safe.
Yet you pursued music.
Yeah, well, try. Yeah. It was, I guess, when you're young and
it was a valiant effort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I mean, in that sense, that's true. But just having that real, I don't know. I remember before Permanence came out, the EP I put out quite a number of years ago now. I was just absolutely shitting bricks, just so scared about every little thing that possibly could have went wrong. And I just remember hating the process, all of the stress, and then having to set up all all the PR and all the release dates and all this, making the videos. And I hated it. I was just, because it was so out of my comfort zone, because I'm just so safe normally. And I'm just doing all these things that are just so not what I was, what my whole ethos was before that.
And it seemed way worse than.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Were you amplifying it?
Oh, 100%. I think back to it now and just think how idiotic I was. But for me, if I haven't done something before or to some sort of, high level, I just freak out, just assume the worst every step of the way. But it was obviously once it was out, that sort of catharsis kicks in and you can sort of see the results. And, it's okay, there's a reason, it's that no pain, no gain kind of mentality. You kind of see it, you sort of revel in that and then live in it and go, oh, I see why people do this. It's you can't just be comfortable all the time, I guess.
So what do you consider to be the riskiest part of what you do now?
Riskiest? I mean, I feel like the things and the stuff that I do and play, it's not the most popular centric, if you play this sort of style of music, you're gonna, you're made for life kind of thing, which I mean, nothing is guaranteed. It doesn't matter how popular, there's a million pop singers out there that aren't making it or whatever it is. But I guess just being a niche name in an already very niche genre and then just sort of putting your all into it, just to me feels really risky in that sense of it could pay off and and things could be great, but there's also just that apprehension to just, I guess, go all in on the board.
Major and minor things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then again, it's not a minor thing. I used to feel that way about metal. At one point, I had this idea that I was majoring in minor things, but I kind of just got over it because plenty of people do okay in it. And what else are you going to do, right? If that's the thing you do, that's the thing you do.
Exactly, yeah. And whatever the result is, you roll with it. And as long as you're happy, I guess as I'm getting older now, I'm realizing as long as I'm doing something that I'm happy with, I guess just being a bit of a perfectionist doesn't really help with, I guess, the consistency of what I'm doing. I'll go through spells where I don't do anything for a month or two, anything music related, just because it's I can't do it. But then there's periods where I'm just exploding with ideas and charisma and inspiration. It was just, I don't know.
2 months of not even playing?
Pretty well, maybe playing here and there, but nothing heavy. It'd be 5 minutes in front of the TV one night before I go to bed or something, but nothing intent or, I'm sort of feeling that fire again at the moment. So, I've been recording a couple things and, it's fun. I'm doing it because it's fun again, I have that luxury, I guess, and I just need to capitalize, I guess, on that feeling.
So in those down periods, first of all, I'm curious, do you get down on yourself, number one? And number two, how do you know you're in a down period? Is it you sit down and brain isn't connecting or ideas are sucking, or like what's it like?
To me, it's just like nothing I play or do sounds good from a creative standpoint or from a technical standpoint. I'm either playing really sloppily or I can't do things that I could do before as easily. And then it's just sort of this cascading sort of downward spiral of like, it's weird. It's just, it happens so often, but then I always 10 times out of 10 will get out of it. Just out of nowhere, I'll just wake up one day, I'm like, oh, fine. It's really odd, like the phenomenon of the human brain, how it can trick you sometimes into thinking you're a lot worse than you actually are. I'm not saying like I'm the best ever or anything. I'll never claim that, but I definitely do need to give myself a bit of a break sometimes. As I get older, I'm much more self-aware of that fact. If you ask like Simon Grove and Jake House and a load of guys I play in a band with, like how negative I can be to my own playing, and just in general, just everything. I feel like I've definitely gotten better, but it's a lifelong journey, I guess.
Yeah. Do you ever probably relate to this? It's almost like no amount of anyone telling you that you sound great will change the feeling of being like, you just don't get it, dude. I sound like shit. Like if there's that thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
But do you ever feel like, because this happens to me often, where like I'll be down about how I'm playing and I'll be like uninspired to pick up the guitar, but it's almost because there's definitely times where like you pick it up and you don't feel confident doing something that you could have done a year ago or months ago or whatever, and then that will kind of compound into like, not being incentivized for the next few weeks or whatever. Sometimes for me it'll be like, okay, this is a shitty period on guitar, I'm not doing anything sick, whatever, but really in hindsight it's just that I was playing great, I just wasn't following the trajectory of getting better and better and better and better and better every time I picked up the guitar.
Yeah, the curve's definitely flattening for sure.
Sometimes the flattening of the curve that still is awesome feels like a decline. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, because that growth, the level of growth from like that same time period is sort of flattening, and it feels like, because it is technically going down. Right. You're not going exponentially
but
up.
Objectively, you still sound like a psycho.
Of course, and like if you told me what you're playing, it's like, oh, you're on and off, like having an off day. Like literally no one in the world would be able to tell except you.
Exactly. That's the thing.
I've heard that a lot about what my playing as well. Like after a live performance. Yeah.
I've thought about this in aviation actually. When you're on an airplane and you first take off. A lot of this is momentum-based, I think. A brain has a very weird way of interpreting momentum. But, like when you first take off and there's that point during the takeoff where they reduce the power and suddenly it feels like you're sinking, and people will be like, what just happened? It literally feels like you're suddenly sinking, but you're not. You're still climbing. They just reduced the power.
Right. Yeah.
If you were to go from 0 to the reduced rate, it would feel like
crazy.
It would feel crazy, but it's because you're doing less, because you're climbing at a slower rate. It's just less power. You feel that power down. You feel your momentum slowing down. You're tricked into feeling like you're sinking.
Right.
When in reality, you're just climbing a little bit slower. And I think that our brain has a very weird way of interpreting which direction we're moving with personal progress too. Because momentum dictates so much of what we do. Like if we're on a roll, like getting better with things, or like in a very creative moment, like I know there's some time periods where I can write all day, every day for like 3 weeks, and then suddenly nothing. Or maybe like one idea will come out that day, and I'll feel like the day was wasted, but I still got one idea that day. So compared to 0, it's still moving forward.
Right.
Compared to how it was before, maybe not as intense, but that momentum shift is where, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, the mental torture begins, because the brain doesn't interpret momentum properly. It feels like a complete stop when it's really not.
Yeah, that's big, man.
And it can almost feel like you're going backwards, and like in extreme cases, which is even more trickery generally, because it's impossible to go backwards. The more I seem to do something sometimes, the worse I feel like I'm getting at it. But it's just trickery. It's just the mind is not interpreting that kind of information properly, and then we kind of just believe these lies, and it's terrible.
Yeah, it's true. But I think the flip side of that is it can yield some pretty awesome results when
that's true. Yeah,
like a brain that thinks that way. On the flip side of that, like when that kind of brain is inspired and like in it, I think that the amount of I mean, Steven, I don't know if you have any kind of like attention deficit stuff. I sure as fuck do, but it's like I'm either all in or all out on things. And like around all that stuff, it's similar where it feels sometimes like you can't have it all. It's almost like anything that comes with some great shit is going to come with some bad shit, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very much like that, sort of all in. Or it's like, I guess what goes up must come down kind of thing as well.
Mhm.
Definitely, yeah, like when I'm sort of in high periods, I guess it's very hard to kind of stop me from doing just that one thing until it's kind of done.
Yeah.
On the other side, it can be a bit of a downer sometimes as well, and it's hard to get out of. But
Yeah.
So when you are in a high, is it basically music all day,
pretty much.
all the time?
Like, even if I don't end up keeping a lot of ideas, it's like the fact that I was just there doing it. These days, it's like just a victory, just picking it up and just enjoying it. That's a victory now, even if I don't keep a lot of ideas. But luckily, I keep a handful around, and it's got this sort of real, I don't know, it's euphoria to it.
You know what I think is important is that if you are the type of person that does go up and down and like has more attention to it, less attention to it, that's okay, as long as you realize that and then make the most of those up periods.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of it. I have noticed a lot of people beat themselves up if they're not like that, because they know people that are hyper consistent that kind of like can get on a routine and just do that every day forever. And they feel guilty around those people. I know I do sometimes, but I'm not like that, and a lot of people I know aren't like that. They're not good at just this linear routine, and that's okay. The trick is to make the most of those high periods. Just like go the fuck all out, basically.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and definitely something I've been doing more of in recent times, for sure, as well.
Yeah.
100%.
Steven, a question I have for you is like kind of around all this is kind of, the rewarding feeling of doing it and kind of being inspired to keep doing it. How much, because I feel like you represent like a niche within a niche within a niche. To me, there's like, it's you and a few other people, but there's like your output on social media of like moments on the guitar, like that collection of things is like a present. It's like an artist. It's like a presentation in and of itself of like probably like what you scroll through that and you're just like, if the aliens came down and were like surveying, like, like what do humans do with, with fixed strings and
too much spare time.
Yeah. Like those are all those moments that you deemed, like, even in all of your scrutiny of your own playing, like those are all those moments that you deemed either acceptable or that you were proud of to put into the world. And
absolutely. That's a good point.
did you ever feel like, kind of in this current climate with all of it and how you relate to the guitar, that like, well, one, what's your relationship when you're writing well versus how you're playing well? Do those things ever sync up? Or for me, they're often very disparate. Like, it's like when I'm usually like feeling really creative and writing cool shit, it's usually like when I'm kind of, for whatever reason, not playing great. And then usually when I'm playing like a psycho, I'm just like kind of being a bit unmusical and just trying to be, as Guthrie would say, pretty Super Mario about it. You know what I mean? Just like, it's almost like a sensory therapeutic thing.
Yeah.
And how much of when you're playing these days, like if you're having a long day sitting in front of the camera, just like pushing yourself, how much of that is in search of that like moment that you can take and like cement? And is that at all part of what drives you, or is it just like a consequence of when you're playing and, you capture something cool and you put it up? Like,
yeah, when it comes to the filming, like the clips in particular, there's just something really cool about not being able to, one, write something and then write it and then somehow play it. Like, just eventually just something that's so, you've just laid this massive just pile of whatever in front of you that's just like this unsurmountable mountain that just cannot be climbed, and then you just somehow just get through it. It's just kind of interesting. Yeah, and you get through it. It's just something really fascinating. And I guess the Instagram stuff for me, like, yes, it is a cool little sort of I guess, little timestamp of where I'm feeling like maybe melodically and obviously technically as well. But it's just these just sort of little bursts of inspiration that, may or may not appear on a song. A lot of ideas are actually put into some tracks that I'm working on now, which is cool.
Yeah.
But that was never the goal. It was just like, this was something that sounded really cool and I want to nail it. And I'm proud of it and I'm going to put it out. Like, and, even if I'll say something like, oh, it's hard, or, I suck, or so many bad notes or whatever. Exactly like you said, it's like I deemed it good enough that I was proud to put that out to the public eye. This is about as clean as I'm going to get it, and I'm happy with that. Like, I'm content with that.
For sure.
Because an hour before that, I couldn't play 3 notes of it. You know what I mean? It's a crazy feeling. It's powerful. I don't know. And I guess it's it's fun. It does sort of spark that inspiration to, it's like, oh, I don't know, just like learning new skill. It's almost like not learning a new skill every time you do it, even though it's like the same skill I'm doing, but it's like just, altering the way you do it just enough where it's like, I don't think too intently about it. These things, I mean, a lot of ideas sort of just come, maybe from an idea, and then I'll play a wrong note and it's like, oh, that wrong note's kind of spicy actually. And that wrong note may lead to like, a key change or like some kind of weird mood change. Like, oh, maybe I can explore that. And I just sort of keep going. It's just sort of like this, it writes itself kind of, and you kind of don't want to be in your own way when you do it. You just let it happen. And
totally.
Yeah. I don't know if you're the same with the insane stuff you come up with.
100%. And like that kind of format of, you're having a great session on your instrument and you're filming it and you're like, feels like something that's 10 to 50 seconds long, or, 10 seconds to a minute long. It's like that amount of time and like you said, like whether it takes you an hour or 2 hours to get it, or even sometimes a day, like sometimes it'll be like a whole day. Thought I was going to get it, didn't get it, and then I go back the next day, and by noon the next day, I'm like,
got it. Yeah, that's the one.
But that feeling though is, and I'm wondering if it's a blessing or a curse, but it feels so good and it feels so rewarding to yourself. But I sometimes wonder, like, man, is this shit keeping me from just like focusing for 2 weeks and like finishing? I could probably finish a record in like 2 weeks if I just like didn't do anything.
Me too.
And I just actually recorded into a DAW versus into an iPhone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same.
It's tricky, but I don't know if you had anything to butt in there.
Well, it's just, that was what I was saying. You can't do everything. You got to pick what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Anything good you're going to do takes time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think people don't understand how much time goes into those iPhone videos. They don't make themselves.
You saw my reel of just like just like these clips, like you would see the day, like what you filmed on this day last year, and there would just be like 40 videos of like 10-minute clips of just like garbage. And it's like I've maybe extracted 20 seconds of all of it. And then I just keep them.
It's pretty crazy. And dude, that's the thing. And another segues into the next thing is because you've been playing out more lately, right? Like you've been playing live.
Yeah. And a little bit more, trying to do that more.
I've seen the evidence, and it's like, because I very much feel like that, where it's like, I'll just film this mountain of like time on the instrument over a few days, and then there's one inhumane 20-second clip in there that you just pull out. Yeah. And you're like, check it out.
Fuck yeah. And I know you do that a lot, which is really good. Just like these crazy economy lines, and it just sort of ends. It's like, oh, I want to see more.
I used to just do that deliberately because, like, I remember someone was telling me at the time, like a few years ago, they're like, hey, like, if you want your videos to do well, like, the algorithm likes shorter videos. And I was like, well, fuck it, fine.
True.
Done. You know what I mean?
True.
And then it just kind of started to become a thing, which I'm trying to kind of to be a bit less.
Man, playing the algorithm is such a dangerous game. Honestly, it's not something I've ever focused on ever. It just sort of
good. In fact, anytime I have, it's made me miserable. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, marketing people hate me.
Yeah, but I wonder though how much of taking your music out and performing it in that setting with a band, someone who's so detail oriented like you, especially with the stuff that you're playing, how much do you have to sacrifice with those kinds of arrangements and those kinds of things, like knowing that, like, if you were in your chair and you're hearing like the perfect blend of string noise and fucking tone out of your monitors, and like all this, like the sensory input is so high, right? Like, because that's a big part of it. I really don't hear enough people talk about like the sensory aspect of playing guitar at a high level, like literally like how sensitive your nervous system is to like how scratchy the pick feels, how the string tension. Sometimes I'll pick up my guitar and it feels like the string tension, like the time it takes for like the transient of a note is like different than the day before, and it freaks me out and I'm not interested. I'm like, nope, I can't do that thing right now unless it feels like how I want it to feel. And that kind of shit, there's no time for that when you're playing out, right?
Yeah, you just gotta go. Yeah.
And like how much of, I'm sure that's probably, again, if you relate to this at all, I'm sure, because I have not taken any of my music out yet, and it's something I'm anticipating, and I want to pick the brains of people like you. Like, how much of that one do you feel yourself having to learn on the spot and kind of compromise and be like, literally no one is going to hear this fucking thing that I'm worried about, so just like get it together and move on? Or do you find a way to kind of make yourself happy? And what has your experience there been, and like just any general notes there?
Yeah, it's tough because like there's no stop recording button when you're live, right? You have to just go. There's no multiple takes, especially playing the stuff that we do. It goes both ways because it's like it's so overly technical and fast and just so dense with ideas at any point. 10 seconds in one of our songs is like basically, a whole beat down song, or, which, I wish I could do that, but
for sure.
I guess like the more you do it, it's sort of the way you play off any mistake, and there will be mistakes. I'm telling you now, that's one thing you have to prepare for.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You are going to make mistakes because, like you said, like you're not in your room, you're on some dark stage where you can barely see your fretboard, and you're tripping on cables, and maybe the tuner isn't working properly or something like that, which happened to me in my one of my last shows. You just roll with it. It's crazy. I remember the band before me knocked my tuner into a different frequency. So I think it was tuned to like 140 hertz or something. So it was like completely different. So and I started tuning, but like silently, I was just going off the screen. And then when we went to play the first song, I was completely out of tune. I'm like, something's not wrong. Everyone's kind of looking at me funny, like, what's going on? And it was just this moment in me, but it's like, I'm looking at the tuner, it looks right, something's up. And it was just, I had this moment of like, I'm just going to switch out. And it was just like this super smooth, like before like Throne of the Anxious comes on, like that really fast riff at the beginning. Had it all plugged in and ready to go with my backup guitar. It was, and that was rules. Sort of like moments where it could have ruined the show, ended up being like the highlight. So it's like those little moments where I can't do that on Instagram. If my guitar's out of tune on Instagram, I stop recording and do it again.
Right,
so it's just different. The way you approach it, it's less about being the most robotically tight. Because you're just going to be up there like a statue. You have to give people a show.
And the other thing I'm wondering too is because like a lot of your sound and the stuff that drives me, and like a lot of those details, it's like you're like, well, how much of this is like going to be heard over like a wash of 180 hertz swirling around the room from like the fucking kick drum. You know what I mean?
With my videos, I feel like I leave quite a lot of mistakes in them. I'm sort of a big advocate for sort of maintaining a lot of the human element to this seemingly inhumane playing that everyone's
hearing you say that.
But really, I guess again, it's one of those things. Maybe I hear it more than anyone else, but because I came up with it, and I kind of expect it to sound a certain way, and you guys, none the wiser. But I feel like having this expectation, like with Instagram, people have these super like clean, like gorgeous and sounds amazing, and like I totally get why they do it, but like my whole thing's always been just this rawness to it. So if I do make a flub live or something, it's like they've heard it before.
Well, to me though, the format of your videos,
there's no format, no. It's just on and off.
It is. I mean, if I genuinely think like if all of your videos were like DI recorded audio with a tone, like for one, I mean, it would. I think even if people are conscious of this or not, like what you do informs the brain that that's you playing. That's you actually playing the instrument. And that's such a huge, that is to me the biggest factor, regardless of the artistic presentation and how it sounds, whatever. It's like, that the person you're seeing is playing that in that moment. And that is like, once you set that as like the table, everything that comes after that is like, holy shit, that's what you're judging it against. That's another part about Instagram. It's like, I've got a camera and I want to make my stuff look better, but it's like there's you gotta, at least for the stuff I value, there's something romantic about that. Like, this is actually me playing the instrument.
Yeah. So the thing about playing live, I guess I've done it the most out of the three of us.
Yeah.
Coming from a studio background first, because my most comfortable place is sitting, and it always has been, at the computer. Even as far back as the late 90s, like, I guess I'm one of the first of this newer generation that plugged into the computer. So like sitting in the control room or bedroom or whatever at the DAW is my preferred place to play. It always has been. And stage is this foreign thing that I had to get used to. And the things that I noticed about it is that you have to shift what it is that you're trying to do. Like, it's no longer about trying to do this exactly perfectly right every single fucking time. It's more like I'm trying to do this with the energy that was intended for this to feel like, and I'm trying to get other people to feel that way. And I'm trying to do it with my adrenaline spiked through the roof. And also, there's this new skill set that comes into the equation of, like you were talking about with the tuning, over a period of many shows, you become an expert at improvising with disasters on the spot. Like, just something kicks in and you just know how to fix it and you get through it and you figure out how to continue the song. And there's this byproduct of the way that you get better at playing music as like complete pieces, which I think is something that people don't do quite so much when they're sitting in front of the computer and filming themselves all the time. The modern way of doing things is in fragments, which makes perfect sense to record in fragments. But by working in fragments, a lot of people leave the big picture out of the equation. You are playing a piece of music or trying to. So live forces that. And so you will never play your music better than immediately following a tour. The thing is, you might have logged less hours playing. In 1 month on tour, you might log less hours on guitar than you would in like 4 days at home. But you'll end up playing the songs way better than you did at home because you got used to solving all these problems in real time on the fly, and you get better at solving problems on the guitar as well. So I've noticed that you have to just accept, though, that it's not going to be, you're just not going to play as perfectly as you do in the studio. It's just not going to happen. And also, who the fuck do we know that actually plays their songs all the way through in the studio perfectly either? So,
me, of course.
Besides you. But I'm saying that feeling bad about that is in itself delusional because no one actually does that in the studio either.
It's an important one,
That's
right?
very
It's
true.
easy to get caught up feeling shitty, holding yourself to a standard that doesn't exist to begin with.
Yeah.
And no one expects you to be at that level anyway. I couldn't imagine anyone that would go to a show like that would expect, note for note perfection. But, as long as you put on a show, man, that's what they're going to remember. All flubs aside.
Dude, people don't trust note for note perfection.
That's right.
When they hear note for note perfection, they think they're hearing tracks.
Very true.
The drummer from Leprous, who is great, he did this playthrough a few years ago where he drops a stick, and he left that in there. And I thought that was a super ballsy and super smart move, actually. It's like 3 minutes into it, this crazy section, and suddenly a stick is gone. He grabs another one and just keeps going. But there is that flub, and I know a lot of people who would have been like, fuck, can't use the video. The fact that he kept it, I think, is incredible because now the question of, well, yeah, we can see him playing, but is what we're hearing, is that actually him? Is it like enhanced?
It's indisputable now.
All those questions out the window.
Yeah.
No, that's him. He fucked up. I remember on an Opeth live DVD, Mike Ackerfeld goes to play this octave chord, like slide up to an octave in one of those like big epic parts, and he lands a half step off, and it's just nasty. And he smiles like he does the whoops fucked up face, and they just keep going. And they kept that in.
That's awesome.
They kept that in.
They almost become highlights of the performance, if anything, because it's like them rolling with the mistake becomes sort of a point of entertainment. You want to go back and see how that happened because it's either funny or it's just like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Like, like he didn't let it get him down or whatever.
They're human.
Exactly. Yeah. You humanize. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. It's like, when you set these unrealistic bars or expectations, it's like, if you can allow yourself to just like be fine with being human and like showing some amount of vulnerability in what you do, inevitably, like, you're just going to find that people welcome that and are like, we know you're a wild player, but like, yeah, we're all people, like,
Yeah, but also what people are going to a show for is different than what
100%,
they're trying to do at home when they're listening in earbuds.
Well, it depends on the crowd, though, right?
They still want to be moved.
For sure. But to my question of before to Steven, it's like the stuff that you play, the crowd that's at that show, I mean, like how many of them are like plugging their ears just looking at your hands the whole time?
That's a good point. Yeah.
I was telling you this, EYAL, recently. We had a phone call about like, I think we were talking about that Tala record or something. And I was like, God, man, like
this shit is wild.
Makes me just want to fucking drop my strap low and fuck all of this and just like move. You know what I mean? Like forget about all the detail and just like be a freight train. You know, the people going to those shows is a very different crowd than the people going to like an Animals show or probably going to see the Helix Nebula or something like that. You know, but to your point, absolutely, like the live experience is always going to have something, regardless of the style, that is missing from a social media post coming out of a 2mm shitty iPhone speaker, you know? Yeah.
Do people plug their ears and stare at your hands at shows?
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
I haven't noticed many, but people do look.
I would be.
Yeah, I guess so. Oh, now that you've put it out there. The next show, I expect everyone to be doing this, all right? I'm not going to be happy if you don't. Here are all my mistakes. But it's a good point. People want to be moved at these shows, regardless of why they're a fan of yours in the first place. Like, they're coming to a show. I mean, I guess it's different for everyone. I mean, for the most part, if they want to see crazy guitar playing, there's Instagram for that, right? If they're coming to see you live, they kind of want to see a bit more than that. So I don't know. I think I've always liked just sort of being a bit more authentic with myself and just leaving mistakes. Even like when I recorded a lot of permanents, it wasn't like this super robotically recorded. I wanted to keep this sort of organic. I mean, like it's obviously I kept the tightest takes possible that I could possibly do. Because why?
By the way, you're on record.
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah.
This is filming.
Quote me on this all you want. That's fine. It wasn't like this, recording, every 2 notes and like to make it as pristine. Like I wanted to sort of keep a bit of a human element.
There's literally a recording. It may even been on this podcast or your own podcast where Simon is talking about how when he mixed that record and he said there were takes that phase canceled.
I heard that.
because they were so like tight.
Yeah. I did one track at his for that, and that's probably the one he was referring to. It's just like
that's ridiculous.
Yeah. There's some parts that were just like so crazy that he had to actually move it. It was pretty insane. But that's an exception, all right? That's not the rule.
I've had that happen with some players sometimes.
It's crazy, yeah. It's not common. It's not common at all.
If you don't know what it is, though, at first, if you're not expecting it, it's very jarring. It's like, why is this suddenly mono?
Yeah.
You're
like, what happened? Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
No, it's just that tight.
Yeah, that's so wild.
So let's talk about some actual guitar, some technical guitar shit.
Let's do it.
Curious, Steven, what's your take? Difference between economy and alternate, and why? Like, why, when, what, how?
I'm just going to pick the one I'm better at naturally, which is alternate. Economy just makes no sense to me. I think the stuff you're doing, Spiro, I think is just that next step of like what's been missing in the economy school. For me, the economy has always been that Frank Gambale 3-note per string, and like it sounds incredibly smooth, and obviously you can get a lot of movement out of it. But I feel like that's it. Again, but like you're sort of just doing something so musical and just so out of this world. Just I've never heard anything like it. Like, me and Jake talk about it all the time, just how stupid and otherworldly it is. But it's just, I don't know. For me, alternate's that Paul Gilbert school of just having, I'm going to say, I feel like I have a bit more control over every note, but you're going to argue and say, you have just as much control over every note doing the economy thing. So it's just different approaches and I guess techniques we've gotten used to over the years. But I just feel like alternate for me, it was just something I was always really drawn to by the sound of it. And I guess I've just honed in on that and found ways to utilize inside and outside picking and getting comfortable with both of those, which, I'm not perfect at, but I feel like I've got a fair grasp on. I feel like economy just has this very linear, like it's up and down. And the way when I do it, that's what it sounds like. I'm not saying that's what it sounds like when you do it, but
first of all, I mean, yeah, hearing you say that is, it's surreal, and I can't thank you enough if you feel that way.
You're nuts, yeah.
To that point about the two techniques, I mean, when I teach people this stuff, I use you as the exception. You're the greatest alternate picker I've ever seen. Like, I don't understand how you do this one thing where, for me, the principle of economy versus alternate is just about if you want to be muted when you're playing. Like, because a lot of what I try to do is like keep it super muted, like all the notes. For me, it's like whichever allows me to keep my palm planted is what I'll do. And the way I kind of do it is like if it's an even number of notes per string, I can keep my palm planted if I'm going alternate. If it's an odd number of notes per string, I can keep my palm planted by going economy. So it's more about which picking technique allows me to keep my palm planted on the strings, depending on playing the left hand. But you do this thing where a lot of great alternate pickers, you know, they'll do the downward slant, upward slant thing going up and down the strings like this. But inevitably, right, when you go to the upward slant, usually like you'll go from muted to unmuted.
Yeah.
But I don't understand really how you do it. When you go to the upward slant, you still mute and there's still no string noise. So you don't need it. It's my like it doesn't really apply to you, I guess. I mean, and this is, I guess, like super technical, but like when you're doing all that, like when you go to that upward slant, when you're flying, going like the two-way stuff, when you're here, like what is covering these strings? Is it like here? Is it like...
It's hard to say. I think Jake tried to break it down last time for me. I do feel like a lot of this sort of, I guess, meaty part of the forearm here, whatever that part is called, I guess because I make pretty small movements with this hand as it is, and I keep everything quite locked in. And I guess just as a byproduct of that, everything is just kind of naturally kept pretty tight across all the strings. It's kind of weird. It's not something I've consciously thought about too much, but I feel like just from a scientific and, realistic, physics sort of point of view, just having your fists quite close, because I know a lot of people like to anchor and have their fingers out. And I feel like that sort of in itself, you're kind of just sort of changing the whole formation of your hand, but keeping it all tight. For me, just always felt like it was keeping things kind of muted. And it was funny, going down felt easier.
Towards the earth or towards the sky?
Towards the sky. So I guess from high string to low. So it feels easier than going down for whatever reason. I feel like I do more steps. I don't know. Again, it might just be because you already have the maximum amount of skin when you're at the highest strings. And so it's less effort to keep them muted on the way down. Yeah.
One thing we both do, and this is just something I've noticed about like certain players, and this is something I like to think that I got from you, but like if this is like downward slant, this is upward slant, when you're here, it almost feels like you can like twitch faster with like all of this than when you're here. If you're going descending real fast, like there's almost this kind of like locked and loaded feeling of just like twitching. It's 100%. Like a whole nother gear that you can't hit. So I could see it from that point of view. If for you, it's just more like that motion is so ingrained and it feels so like that muscle memory is so like intimate there that you can just cruise, and it's amazing. I mean,
I don't know, for whatever reason going in that direction, is that down or up? Are we going to consensus? Is that down or up?
Down, but
okay, so down towards the sky.
Yeah, exactly.
So going in that direction is always just felt more natural.
Well, you're in Australia, so
true.
Blame the orientation on that one, but the notes are going higher, so I'm going in this direction.
Yeah,
let's go with that one.
So up towards the ground.
Up towards the ground. When it comes into the notes, like say it's 3 notes per string, when it comes to the notes where you're trapped inside the strings, I feel like my hand has to kind of do this like sort of jump in between those.
And that's where you do this.
Yeah, exactly. But like you actually physically see like my whole hand kind of just like do this sort of jarring motion. But I don't get that on the way down. It's really strange. So something to do with, I guess, the cleanliness. So like that jump allows me to kind of, it's like this microsecond point where my sort of forearm sort of comes off the strings and then plants back on in sort of like a new position. I don't need to do that on the way down. Again, it's just one of those things that like you fail a billion times, and then when you try a different way and you go, okay, this is working, you just stick with it. And again, that muscle memory is just sort of all locked in now. So I'd love to get on like the Troy Grady, like cracking the code kind of thing. And just like, I'd love to see for myself what's actually going on. Need to get an iPhone.
That's got to happen.
And for you as well, man. And for you, for sure.
Let's do it, dude.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll get it.
That'd be cool. I mean, I would love to, those fucking things that he has, those like magnet things with the phone, like, I don't know why those are so hard to get, but man, those would be so useful.
Just make our own. Just 3D print one or something.
Dude, I've legitimately thought about it.
Yeah, me too.
That's what I'm trying to understand. You said that some of it you don't think about too much. So did you just intuitively get there, or was it a conscious thing like, I want to mute more, have to mute more, and then just adjust in that direction?
I feel like it was, I mean, as the years go by, it definitely became more of an intuitive, I guess, as you sort of get a bit more accomplished and confident with the instrument, you kind of know the sounds you're trying to go for, and then getting there feels a bit quicker and a bit easier because you kind of know like the ins and outs of the instrument. But at first, it was hard to say. I mean, for me, the way I learned most of my technique was just playing along to songs. Like it was never really doing a lot of the instructional thing. And there were a few, like obviously Rock Discipline and some of the Paul Gilbert, the early 80s ones with the cheerleaders and all that weird Zanny stuff. But man, that stuff still holds up today. I'll tell you what.
Give me an L.
Yeah. All that stuff. Licks. Like listening to like a lot of the Dream Theater records and Symphony X, especially like early on, all those like crazy, and like Yngwie Malmsteen, like early Yngwie and stuff. It was just like they're making this sort of like that crazy like 3-note per string, but like warp speed 3-note per string. It just had this sort of
neck
like
pickup.
Exactly, that exact sound. You know exactly what I'm talking about,
dude. It's a thing, man. It's a thing.
Yeah, I know Romeo and like Malmsteen were like absolute gods at it, and I still love it to this day. So it was really just a matter of me just trying to hone in on that skill. And it was never something that I consciously thought too much about technique. It was more just like, what's the fastest way I can get to that sound? And out of that came that sort of, the weird sort of the pick slanting just naturally. I didn't know what pick slanting was until cracking the code, of course. And then even Jake, when he was watching me one day do like a run like that, he goes, oh yeah, you do the slanting thing. It's like,
right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess ultimately it was more of an intuitive kind of thing, but just trying to emulate a sound that I heard somewhere else.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy original, but like I guess my approach to it may have been unique compared to like say how they did it. Because I know Michael Romeo from Symphony X is very similar to me in his approach. Like he was never like a super like technique heavy, and he could break down his techniques to like a most minute detail. He just did it.
What would your practice consist of back in the day versus now? Well, what an average day look like?
I mean, I guess it was a bit more exercise heavy. Again, maybe learning more of other people's songs was definitely more beneficial to my playing. But these days, it's more just coming up with my own ideas, and then sort of just out of that, I guess, spawns something that could be, not done before or a little bit left field. Because when you learn people's songs, you kind of just end up just emulating them, and you don't really. It's a great learning tool at first, but then if you just sort of get stuck in just learning other people's techniques and songs, you end up just sort of becoming them.
Sounding like them,
yeah. And then like once you've learned all their songs, where do you go from there? If you haven't really sort of garnered a need to learn your own, and extract what you like from them and sort of Frankenstein all these ideas of different players. So for me these days, my biggest practice tool, I mean, like I like to improvise here and there. Like I'll put on a track or something, YouTube ad comes on, I'll just jam to it or something while I'm waiting for the video to load, little things like that. But I love just coming up with ideas, and then out of those ideas, it's just like, oh, that's a cool melodic idea. That's really hard though. But I want to maintain that melodic contour that I've created out of this stupid idea. So then through that, I just end up picking up these crazy ideas I never would have thought to play. The Guitar Pro is great for that. Like you can just literally put in any notes that are like 24 frets apart, 64th notes, and
climb the mountain.
Obviously, there's a limit to what's possible, but there are things you can, do and to make it a bit more creative. So yeah.
So basically, come up with something cool. And then learn how to play it, and then build stuff off of it, basically. See how far you can take it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then just take the time to actually be able to play it.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't always work. There's a lot of things I've written that I can't play and I'm probably never will be able to play. That's fine. You just got to move on to the next one. It's fine. Yeah. It's all learning. How about you? What's different from the early days to now?
Me or EYAL?
Either.
EYAL, how about you?
Well, before I quit for a few years, I used to put in way more hours, like back in the day, but they were way more like unstructured. I would practice technique pretty heavily, but I didn't have good ways of keeping track of things. So it would just be like hours and hours and hours of, I think, practicing things that like I was told to practice or my own songs, but now it's very regimented. Everything's down to 5-minute increments, and I keep it on a spreadsheet, and I'm always like targeting exact tempos and going for the exact techniques that are going to be relevant to what I'm doing because I don't have much time for playing. So I have to make sure that the time I do spend is hyper efficient and giving me progress. I don't have time to be lax about it. So I'm just super specific about what it is that I need to be working on. And then I practice the fuck out of the techniques involved, basically.
Do you feel like you need to be doing it, or do you still like wake up and like say you haven't played for a few days and you sort of get that itch to sort of play it? Like, is that still there or?
Yeah. More than ever.
Yeah, good. I think that's the important thing. Yeah.
When I quit, I did not want to play. I quit playing because every time I picked it up, it was like, I hate this. So
it's a scary thought.
Hey, it can happen. And cool things can happen too, even if it happens. During that time period is when I got URM off the ground. So changing directions is not a bad thing, as long as you don't make it a bad thing. I know people who have changed directions and fucked up, but for me, it was a great thing. And then coming back to guitar, I actually enjoy it again. So I feel like I need to practice that way just to keep up and to keep improving, but also like I want to. That's very different. Like I enjoy it. It's fun. And like I'm really into getting a lot better right now. I just think here's the thing. The world changed in the time that I quit. Like this new breed of guitar players showed up on the scene. Amp sims got way better. The internet, like...
Dude, it's an exponential curve.
Yeah, everything is better. It's so much better now. And also, like, I created a website specifically for getting better at guitar with, like, some of the best guitar players on earth. So there's all these, like, tools at my disposal for guitar that just didn't exist back then. And so if you want to get good at guitar, there's never been a better time period than now. It's kind of like... I went to sleep in the past and woke up in the future, and the future's way cooler. So to me, I feel like if you didn't experience the past, you might not understand just how different it is. But like, if you haven't seen somebody in a long time and they like lose a bunch of weight, it's very obvious. But if you live with them, you might not notice.
Or even if you yourself are looking in the mirror every day, like you don't, that there's the time scale that you see that transition at is crazy.
Yeah, good point.
Exactly. It's a similar sort of thing. Taking a break and coming back to the world of music years later, it's so profoundly different now. And it's so much better for someone who wants to get good and someone who wants to do stuff. So I don't know. I feel very similar to the way I did when I was like 14 or something.
That's
and
great.
Just trying to get better. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, my challenge is mostly to like make sure that the time I'm spending is as effective as possible, just because I really can't spend 8 hours a day on it or anything.
Yeah, I think if you can play the guitar with your inner 14-year-old in mind, you're always going to be in good shape. Because that's just like that relentless, just like there's just nothing else that you want to do in that, in that moment in time.
While I'm playing, I'm like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I've become a really not angry, but I'm a really irritable person if I haven't played in a while. It's kind of weird. As much as I'll say like, I just don't want to deal with it sometimes. There's just something in me that's just like, call it habit, call it, I don't know, sort of insatiable hunger, I guess. But I need to be playing it. Even if I don't play for long, it needs to be something that I do every day. Because I notice, like if I've gone on holidays or something and I'm gone for like 2 weeks, it's like once that second week hits, I'm just the worst person to be around. I'm just really irritable and I'm like tapping on tables and stuff. It's really strange. Yeah, and it's funny how like the older I get, that hasn't gone away at all. It's really bizarre. Yeah. It's just one of those things. So I guess maybe that's helped keep everything kind of in check when it comes to technique and all that sort of thing, and it's keeping me improving as well. Because I feel like I have improved. Maybe I don't see it. It's like, again, that curve is kind of flattening, as we were talking about before. But yeah, I think it's important that people still find it fun if they're on this journey to get as good as they possibly can be. I don't know, just having that itch or that drive to do it is sort of, it's almost automatic when you want to do it. You shouldn't have to feel like you need to dedicate an hour and, oh, okay, I've got to play guitar now. Like it's never was ever like that for me. Like not for a single second. It's always I've done it because I wanted to do it. So
yeah,
I don't know if it's the same for you guys.
Dude, like that hour that I sit down, or even if it's 20 minutes here or however long it is, it's like I'm into it. And I remember actually John Petrucci, his episode, we took a question from listeners which was, how do you get motivated to practice? And he didn't know how to answer. He like started laughing. It's like, what do you mean by get motivated?
Yeah.
He was like, I never had to get motivated.
100%.
You don't get to that level if that's how you approach it, right? Unless I just don't understand the span of how different brains can be wired. But I can't imagine getting at that level unless it's something that you like need to do, right?
It goes for any skill, not just guitar. Like, you know,
anything,
run a business,
anything.
you know, like they're always thinking about running a business. It comes to them. They don't have to go seek out,
it's not homework.
Yeah. You know, like I did a software engineering course, and that to me felt like work, you know what I mean? Like every day is this what my life has become? Like this is, I have to think about this stuff all the time and still suck at it. You know, there's certain brains, you know, and everyone who's listening and has that drive for something, whether it's guitar or whatever they're really good at. I don't know. So I guess from guitar players' point of view, we probably have, I guess, an envious mindset that people would, people would be envious of having. That not everyone has, and doesn't mean you can't ever get good if you don't have that mindset. But I feel like we have definitely a sort of an upper hand when it comes to why we've improved as well as we have. It's just because it's just automatic.
There's a tunnel vision involved for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's a tunnel vision, and again, if people aren't thinking that, don't let that discourage you. But it's just an extra tool in our, extra arrow in our quiver that helps us sort of stay motivated and, I guess, continue to improve. But there might be something else may inspire you to keep getting better. There's probably people that play once a week that are still absolute freaks at the instrument.
Well, dude, I mean, that's the thing, like, especially on Instagram and stuff. I'm sure this is like raised to the fucking way more for you even, but like I'll get tagged in shit that people will like learn my licks, and it's some dude with like 180 followers and like follows 4 people. And I'm just like, who the fuck are you? Where, what? Like,
I guess some back dude, to the drawing board, I got to get better again.
Some dude in Indonesia with a Motorola Razr decided to film himself. And it's just like, oh my God.
10 times cleaner. Yeah.
It is like it's like a law for sure at this point. And there's like an exponential curve that's going up. But like the rate at which the collective of people are maybe, again, we could argue about whether it's the perception because the ability to get yourself out there is higher versus if the information and good resources are just out there and that allows for people to get better. But like, it is pretty outrageous.
No, they're better.
Definitely better.
To me, Steven, you, if not were the one, like you were one of the few names that like you fronted to me that kind of like next wave in the scene of like, what?
It's big call.
Well, at least just from my point of view, like it's a big world, but it's a small world too. Like you can see who's into what, and like it feels like this like virus that
explosion, right? Yeah,
that's spreading. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's never been a more inspiring time to be a guitar player, which is crazy, right?
I love it.
And me too.
If you just look at like the Abasi Concepts artist roster, like how many psychopaths?
Yeah, they definitely sort of curate. Yeah, these absolutely almost AI generated level of skill. And then there's me. But yeah.
Yeah, get out of here.
Look, I can tell you from being in the metal scene in the 2000s, for instance, when we would tour with everybody, there were not that many awesome guitar players. Like, there were a few, but it was like Jeff Loomis and John Petrucci. It was like the dudes about still. There were a few other people who like were known badasses, but few and far between. And usually on local levels, there was almost nobody good. It wasn't like there's all these random people that are just fucking crazy good, like everywhere in the world. Definitely not like that. I realized that you didn't have as much access to people, but one thing that you did have is MySpace, so you could hear people's bands. On tour, you would hear tons of local bands. And on tour, you also play with tons of bands.
Right.
And so you can get a good idea of what the general bar is. And it was kind of low compared to now. It just was. There weren't that many great players compared to now.
I guess it was reflective of, I guess, music that was pretty popular around. Obviously, like the 90s kind of killed the guitar solo, and then 2000s was kind of regaining, it's a bit more of a riff-centric.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so I guess it was all just a product of what was kind of popping and what was, but now it's like, point. I guess people got sick of no guitar solos, and then, like you mentioned, Jeff Loomis and Petrucci and all those guys, not only bringing it back, but sort of coming back, just roaring out the gate, like with these all these crazy new ideas that were completely foreign before they came onto the scene. And then through that breeds just this exponential growth in creativity and technique. And that trend will never, look now with Instagram, like anyone with a phone can just show how good they are to the world, and it may or may not gain traction, but someone's going to see it and get influenced by it, and then they'll come off their own sound. It's just, like you mentioned, it's like a virus. It's just like it can't be contained. If anything, it's just going to spread even more.
Amazing.
And it's so exciting, man, because it's like...
Does that motivate you?
100%, yeah. Like, I think it's demotivating as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a good thing for everyone. It keeps, me and everyone that are really heavy into like the technique thing, keeps it fresh, and like, finding new ways to approach things. It keeps it fun and exciting. And if you get better, that's just a bonus, I love it, man. It's great. It's never been a more exciting time to be a guitar player. It's actually wild. And I hope that trajectory keeps going, honestly. I'm excited to see what people are going to be doing in like 5 or 10 years from now. And,
I'm scared. Yeah.
I remember you made a post of like it was like a story post. It's like, you're kind of excited to like compete with AI or something like that. It's like, I'm ready for like the AI side.
I am actually. Yeah. I think it's inevitable that now they're language models, but there's going to be these, neural networks that are trained on harmony and the biases of the human ear. And it's not going to be long before people will be able to generate through composed, intentional, intelligent sounding music that's gorgeous. And I think there's going to come a point to where the final frontier is just like, can you play it? If it comes to a point to where like expressing yourself through, and it, of course, you can never take away the importance of that from a human being. Like there's always going to be that, significance of people wanting to hear music that's composed by their favorite artist. But I do think it could be a cool moment if that competition gets more and more and more on the compositional side. If it's like, all right, like let's go out and play it. I mean, if they start making robots that have joints that can manipulate strings and do all that kind of thing, cool. I'm down. I do think that could be like a rebirth of like the performer in the most human sense,
We can learn from it. It would just be like this symbiotic. I liken it to like chess. A lot of the greatest chess players use a lot of chess engines that come up with these insane combinations and gambits that never existed.
And the greatest chess player in the world will always be beaten by a language model or whatever.
But like no one is looking for, like I'm just going to follow AI chess bots. I'm not going to watch humans play it. No one's doing that. Like, they're learning from the AI to better their playing as a human. So I feel like music, it'll be a similar thing where AI will come up with the most unearthly stuff that's like amazing on face value, but ultimately we're going to learn from that, and then we're going to make it our own, and then it's going to be super exciting. People, I don't know, like I can see why people are scared, but at the same time, it can be pretty exciting at the same time.
If something's an inevitability, I don't see the utility in being scared.
Exactly, just grab it by the horns, man.
What's the alternative? Are you going to you either adapt or get crushed? Like
exactly.
Yeah, I just think people are afraid of the future. They've always been afraid of it. And I think it's just any time period, people who can't see, I guess, don't have vision for things or have a very scared type of worldview, will just invent really, really bad outcomes about things that they don't understand. And I just think it's human nature to be super negative about anything coming up. But it's not any different than the outcome is going to be different, but the attitude is not any different than like when Superior Drummer happened. And there's this whole like thing about drums versus fake drums. Like what's going to happen?
And now drummers can make money on tour.
Yeah, like you're going to kill drums. You're going to kill music, blah, blah, blah. It didn't die. It's better than ever.
There's more drummers than ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that none of us know where the AI thing's going to go, but like I have a real hard time believing it's going to be anything but awesome. and that it's going to be anything besides a tool for us to get better and do better things.
I agree,
sure.
100%.
Yeah.
I welcome it.
I think it's a good place to end the episode. Stephen, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to hang out. It has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Like I said, it's an absolute honor to be on here, man. It's been a long time coming, but thank you so much. Got to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime.
For sure.